5-minute break between talks. That's not too much. Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to this talk. My name is Sebastian. I live in Cambridge, and I've been teaching English for 13 years. This is the title of my talk. Right. I think I'm going to confuse you a bit now, because what I will say will be a little bit different from what Wayne said earlier, but I think there's actually quite a lot in common, hopefully. Right. So my goal is to convince you that the goal of our work as teachers of English should be to develop a pleasant, non-native accent in our students. This is the end result, the target that we should have in mind when teaching English. Somewhere down the road. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight. Now, the word pleasant may seem a bit imprecise, because what I find pleasant will differ from what you find pleasant. But I would say that there are certain objective parameters that characterize a pleasant accent. By the way, I'm video recording this talk, and I'm planning to upload it online, if it works, and along with the slides that I'm using, and you will be able to find it on my blog. Which you can find by adding .com to my name. Right. So, I'm going to start with defining what a pleasant non-native accent is. Then I'm going to suggest how to work on it, as well as present some reasons for which spoken performance is worth working on. And finally, I will look at some obstacles due to which working on the spoken performance isn't happening enough in class. And I'm also going to suggest how to overcome these obstacles. So what is a pleasant non-native accent? It's an accent of a person who speaks comfortably and fluently, which is pleasant to listen to. As I said earlier, I believe there are certain objective parameters that characterize such an accent. But before I talk about these parameters, I want to show you an example. I will play a short video clip with Christoph Waltz. Just in case you didn't know, he's a German actor. He's both. I think he has dual citizenship. Anyway, so you know him, right? Okay, and basically this is how he speaks English. Very short clip. He will be describing his first meeting with Tarantino.
It might be true, it's probably part of the sum total, but you know, and Quentin in his work is like almost traditionally old-fashioned, immensely well-behaved, immensely accommodating, polite and helpful, and you know, sometimes to the degree of being solicitous, and you know, he sort of goes out of his way to make you feel comfortable and right and wanted, appreciated, and this incredibly never-ending flow of energy that sort of pulls everybody along, so that you encounter that as you enter the room.
Right. We could clearly hear that Christoph Waltz didn't sound like a native speaker of English. He didn't sound British. There are many British accents. American, Australian, Canadian. He definitely has a German accent. But I would describe...
No, I don't think he has
a German accent. You can hear it. Right. I would say that... Okay, but I mean, my point is that it would be quite obvious that he's not a native speaker of English if you heard him. And well, he started learning when he was actually not as a small child, but actually quite late. Right. But yeah, that's the thing. I would describe his accent as pleasant. So, okay.
We agree.
In a sense, he is not native.
native, but from a
Yeah.
speech and sound point of view, I would say he sounded pretty native. Far better.
Okay, that's
far more so than
that
some
kind of
native
opens another
English
topic,
speakers
what we
I-
defined as native, because we heard this morning. Like, yeah. Okay, right. So, what makes an accent pleasant to listen to? I would say that the following elements have to be, very basic elements have to be correct. Wayne will disagree with me. The articulation of phonemes, so the individual sounds of English, the word stresses, so the right syllables need to be stressed, strong and weak forms in utterances, in connected speech. They should be as similar as possible to native. The same with the intonation. Also our voice projection contributes to the way we sound. Language accuracy obviously is very important, but most importantly is Christoph Waltz sounded natural, he sounded comfortable. He didn't sound as if he was trying very hard to, I don't know, sound, to imitate some accent. He was relaxed. So this, in my view, is the most important element. Language accuracy, I mean, we could forgive some language mistakes. Now, what happens in class is that most attention is usually given to language accuracy, which is important, but it's one of quite a few elements. So, how to work on these things? As teachers, we tend to have certain routines that we develop and follow in class. And I'd like to propose that we should include in our repertoires the following routines, very basic. Whenever we want to draw our students' attention to the pronunciation of a piece of language, let's get them to think about the syllable and the stress. So if we wanted them to pronounce this word correctly, we can ask them, how many syllables? Right? Where is the stress? Develop. Makes a big difference, stressing the right syllables. Another example, how many syllables? Where is the stress? Computer. Then the next thing to include in our repertoire is to always put words in chunks. Start with an individual word, but don't leave it on its own. Put it in a language chunk. I have it on my computer. Here, the backward build-up drill, a bit forgotten, is a very useful technique. So we start from the end. Computer, my computer, on my computer. I have it on my computer. Like in an individual word, one syllable is stressed. In connected speech, some words take a strong form. So when we deal with an utterance, one more example, how many syllables? Where is the stress? Coincidence. And again, we put it in a language term. What's a coincidence? Are you a teacher? I'm also a teacher. Right? Like in an individual word,
What
one
a
syllable is
coincidence,
stressed.
meeting
In connected
Manchester.
speech, some words take a strong form. So when we deal with an utterance like this, it's useful to get the students to identify which word is going to be stressed. Phone number. Can I have your phone number? Right? Correctly applying the strong and weak forms is what makes us sound more natural. The same with the intonation. If we think about questions, the common thing that happens with students is that they want to apply rising intonation to questions. Can I have your phone number? Right? It's because they transfer it from the first language. But in English, most questions have a falling intonation. Can I have your phone number? Right? So I would suggest that we need to be constantly paying attention to these elements and make them part of our classroom routine, if we are not doing it already. Syllables, stresses, language chunks instead of individual words, strong and weak forms, intonation. You saw this expression earlier. This is one of my lessons. I try to be in class before students start turning up, and I put this phrase up on the screen, or I write it on the whiteboard if there is no projector, so the students see it as they enter the room. And I just get them to say this phrase out loud. The usual problems are with sometimes the students may not understand the word frustrating, so if they don't know it, I don't straight away tell them what it means, and I don't let them look it up in the dictionary. I insist that first they need to pronounce the whole phrase correctly. Hopefully, keeping them in suspense for a while can make this piece of language more memorable. The usual problems are with the pronunciation of the question type. So again, people want to apply rising intonation here. It's frustrating, isn't it? So I remind them that in most question tags there is falling intonation. It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand the meaning you're trying to convey.
Of course, yes. Yeah, of course, it's true. Right. Another thing is the over-pronunciation. Isn't it? And it has to be, isn't it? Isn't it? So when we, yeah, okay. So when we clarify that, I get my students to repeat this phrase a few times. Here, I often borrow from Adrian Underhill and Jim Scrivener this technique where I say to the students, listen to how I say it, don't repeat it aloud, but just replay it in your head in my voice. It's frustrating, isn't it? Yeah, so replay it in your head in my voice. Then replay it in your head in your voice. Okay, and now say it aloud. Yeah, so kind of.
It's frustrating. Oh, sorry.
It is frustrating. A few other phrases. Again, where are the strong and weak forms? I hate being stuck in
In my
traffic.
head.
Okay, we can do the we can use the backward build-up drill. The traffic, in the traffic, stuck in the traffic. We can also do a bit of acting to make it more fun. So, for example, say it like you're a bit angry. I hate being stuck in the traffic. Be more angry. I hate being stuck in the traffic. Okay? So we drill it for a while. Thank you. We drill it for a while, and then we do a mini dialogue. So one student says, "I hate being stuck in the traffic," and somebody replies, "Oh, it's frustrating, isn't it?"
Who doesn't?
Okay, and then I give them a few other phrases, and again, we drill it in a similar way, and eventually the students do a mini dialogue. So somebody says, I applied for over 20 jobs, and I didn't even get an interview. Oh, it's frustrating, isn't it? And so on, and so on. The final stage of this lesson is where students have a minute to write down their own utterance, to which somebody could reply, it's frustrating, isn't it? At this stage, the students may want to say something, and the teacher's role is to help them say it better. We can also see if the students have correctly understood a phrase that they've been drilling, and if they have a feel for how to use it correctly. So basically, it's a lesson based on one phrase with particular emphasis on spoken performance. I've developed a few lessons like this, and they are all based on some common chunks of language. Right. I would also like to show you how, in a very simple way, I've adapted a lesson from a course book. This is Total English Advanced. I really like this course. I've used it a lot with students. And I really like this lesson from it. Basically, what we've got on this page is the heading, 2-part expressions. Then there is a picture, 2 police officers. Then there is a set of 12 2-part expressions, law and order, facts and figures, trial and error, presented in sentences, together with the definitions of those expressions. The students need to match the expressions with the definitions. The next activity suggested here is for students to test each other in small groups. One student says trial, and the other student is supposed to say and error, law and order. After that, there is another set of 12 questions with gaps, into which students are supposed to put the correct 2-part expressions. Then there is a speaking exercise with a set of questions, into which students containing some of those 2-part expressions. And finally, the students are asked to write a short paragraph about the state of law and order in their country. Right, so, I think it's not a bad lesson. I've done it many times with students, but then at some point I thought to myself, what is it that I like about this lesson? And I decided that I really like the language. These are very nice, very common and very useful expressions. But I gradually became less and less keen on the delivery of this lesson, the way it's been suggested in the course book. So I decided to leave these exercises and focus just on the language. So I just put these sentences into a PowerPoint, and in class I get the students to pronounce them correctly. The usual problems are with the words through, with the word trial. It's useful to identify the distribution of strong forms. Most of what I know about computers, right? We can do the backward build-up drill, so error and error, trial and error, through trial and error. And finally, the students are supposed to say the whole sentence correctly. I learned most of what I know about computers through trial and error. And then, at some point, I ask, okay, do you think you remember this sentence now? Can I remove it? Can you say it? And the students say, I learned most of what I know about computers through trial and error. Okay, how about you? Right, shall we do another one? Here are a few facts and figures about the city. Again, we drill it for a while, and at some point I ask the students, do you think you remember this sentence? Can I remove it? Can you say it? Here are a few facts and figures about the city. Do you still remember the first sentence? I learned most of what I know about computers through trial and error. Okay? It's fun. And then another one, right?
For you.
And so on. So, I'm sick and tired of your excuses. So, what I want to do, I want my students to memorize these sentences, even though I realize that memorizing itself is often not very positively associated. It brings to mind this sort of old-fashioned style of education. Memorizing is not so good if it means mechanically reciting information without understanding, but memorizing chunks of language is definitely going to be more useful than learning this way. So learning only the two-part expressions and their equivalents in the student's first language. Right? Okay. I would say that the teacher's job also involves selecting language chunks that are worth memorizing. Very often, students are expected to memorize paralanguage, subject plus to be plus verb plus ing, right? I would argue that whenever possible, instead of memorizing paralanguage, students should memorize language. And of course, I realize that it doesn't seem very creative, but if we think about it, all that we say, in a way, is built from what we have heard before. So in class, I'd rather focus on the spoken performance, and these activities can be done for homework. Okay. Okay. So, I've defined a pleasant non-native accent. I've made a few suggestions of how to work on it. Now, why? It's been quite rightly pointed out that working on the student's pronunciation develops their ability to hear. This is already a good enough reason to give more attention to spoken performance, but this is not the only argument. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Edgar Dale's cone of experience, proposed in the 1940s. It suggests how much we remember from different activities that we do. We don't have to take the percentages too seriously, but it's been suggested that we remember not so much from what we hear in a lecture, and then at the bottom of this pyramid, we can see this conventional wisdom that the most effective way to learn is by teaching others. And just above it, there is practice by doing. Engaging motor skills means that we remember the activity better, what Wayne was talking about. The sort of training that should be happening in class is more or less what actors do, how actors train. They engage motor skills. Also, the activities that I'm talking about, that I'd like to see happening more in class, are in line with the lexical approach. I know that many of you are familiar with the lexical approach, but I will remind you that it relies on the pattern of observe, hypothesize, experiment. So first we are exposed to something, then we make some hypotheses about it, and then we experiment. As this is how we learn our first language. To give you an example, sometimes students want to pronounce this word as food. Why? Because earlier they learned such words as book, food, and room, and so they hypothesize that double O will be pronounced as O sound, and so they experiment with it. Lexical approach recognizes that this is the pattern in which we learn language and draws on it. The difference between the lexical approach and the grammar-based syllabus is that the grammar-based syllabus assumes that we need to learn all possible grammatical structures, and then the spoken performance will come naturally. Lexical approach is the opposite. We get our students to memorize, to learn language in chunks, and from that they can hypothesize how language works. And one more reason for which we should be giving more attention to working on the students' spoken performance, we should be developing a pleasant non-native accent in our students, is because students want it. How do I know? I conducted a little survey some time ago. It was a quieter time at the school where I was working. There were only 20-something students in the whole school. And I gave out this questionnaire to all the students who were present on one day. And I received back 20 completed questionnaires. So the students were asked about their name, gender, first language, and then which of these goals is the most important to you? Write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in each box, 1 being the most important. I would like to be able to write in English at a native level. I would like to sound like a native speaker of English. I would like to be fluent in all the grammar rules of English. I would like to know the English vocabulary at a native level. I would like to be completely fluent and comfortable when speaking English. I would like to understand everything I hear in English. So, what do you think? Which of these statements was most frequently selected as number 1?
The last one.
Yeah, 10 people out of 20 said that they would like to be completely fluent and comfortable when speaking English. Then 6 people selected this one. I would like to sound like a native speaker of English. We can see that these two answers are about the spoken performance. Altogether, that's 16 out of 20. That's 80%. And then 2 people would like to understand everything they hear in English, and 2 people would like to be fluent in all the grammar rules. Yeah. This is just a very small survey, and I'm not claiming that the results can be extrapolated to all learners of English, but I would say that there is an important lead here. And perhaps I should explain how the idea for this survey came to me. Basically, I've had students who said, as they were starting their course, that their goal was to sound like an English native speaker. And then I remember a situation where I was giving feedback to one such student who wanted to sound native, and I told her, after she did a presentation, which was part of the course, and I told her that she had a very nice accent, which was true actually. I told her that overall she didn't sound like a native speaker, but some words she pronounced like a native speaker. And then my impression was that what I said to her made her more relaxed and comfortable about her English. And then I also have noticed with other students later that students find it motivating if you tell them that they have a nice accent. Of course, we should only say it if we really mean it. But there are students who have nice accents, right? So, okay. Now some obstacles. One reason for which spoken performance isn't getting as much attention as it should in class is this official policy that any accent is fine as long as it can be understood. I'm not challenging it, but I would just emphasize that any accent is fine as long as it can be understood comfortably without making a lot of effort. A pleasant accent doesn't have to overall sound native, but the elements that I specified earlier, articulation of phonemes, distribution of stresses, need to be as similar as possible to the so-called native. It has also been pointed out that pronunciation is often neglected because it means investing a lot of time and not getting a very tangible result. If there is this expectation to cover the whole course book, the teacher may feel that there is no time for spoken performance. The lesson that I showed you earlier, the one based on the phrase, "it's frustrating, isn't it?" It may seem that like in this lesson the students haven't learned much because they only learned one phrase in 1 hour. I would say, firstly, that at least they really learned this one phrase, and secondly, there were other phrases there with those mini dialogues. But that lesson shows that there is only so much that can be done in class, and I think what Wayne was talking about is that there is only so much that we can do. So because of this, I would say that the teacher's job is to weigh up what sorts of activities the students can do on their own, and where the teacher's expertise is really necessary. It seems to me that targeting spoken performance from whatever we do from the course book, is where the teacher's expertise is valuable, and anything that can be done that students can do on their own can be assigned as homework. Now, if we look at the phonemes, because there are so many of them, it may be rather hard, and possibly there may be no point going through each of them in class. Although it's definitely useful to draw the students' attention to specific sounds that they find problematic. Again, there is only so much that we can do in class. If a student has a problem with a specific sound, it will be a matter of many hours of one-to-one coaching to really train that student to produce this sound correctly. There is one online resource which might help. On the BBC website there are the lessons of phonemes, which I'm sure some of you know, but I will show you anyway. So basically, there is this second tag here, the sounds of English. And if we scroll down, we will see all the sounds. And if we click on the sound that is usually problematic, let's say the voiceless TH sound, we will see a short video clip in which a tutor teaches us how to produce this sound. As Wayne said, you can't learn much by just watching, but...
This is a voiceless consonant. It's pronounced. Now, did you notice that I make the sound by sticking my tongue out just a little bit and blowing air between my tongue and my top teeth. Now you try. Watch and listen. Again. You can hear the sound, the beginning of the words thing, throw, and thumb. In the middle of the words author.
Okay, I think you get the idea. So if we have a student who has a problem with a specific sound, this is what they could do for homework. For example, your task is to become expert in this sound. Of course, they would need some one-to-one time as well. Other things that I often recommend to students are, for example, these online activities. If we go to Google and type Headway OUP, the first thing that comes up are exercises that go with the Headway course book. There are 6 levels: beginner, elementary, pre-intermediate, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced. If we click on advanced, we will see that there are some grammar exercises, some vocabulary exercises. And there is also this section, everyday English. And if we choose arranging to meet, so there is a dialogue that we can listen to.
Hi, Jenny. You alright?
Uh-huh. You?
Yeah.
And we can also go to specific sections of this dialogue.
Well,
Well, I was wondering if...
Okay. Other things that I often recommend to students would be self-audio recording, self-video recording, as I'm doing now, reading aloud and always checking the pronunciation, especially of the words that you already know. Right? Coming back to the phonemes, yes, close all tabs. Because there are so many of them, we may not be able to go through all of them in class, but one sound that we can and should tackle in class is the schwa sound. The most common sound in the English language. I will very quickly show you how I do it. So, the schwa sound appears in the word famous. How many syllables? Where is it? Famous. And if we remove the vowel between the m and s sound, and if we just try to link these two sounds, m, s, ms, ms, okay, not moose, not mess, m and s, ms, famous. Okay. So what I often say to students is that they shouldn't actively try to give this sound any shape. It's not famous, not famous, famous. Just linking the two sounds. So the schwa sound is right there. Another good example is the word about. So about, and the schwa sound is at the beginning. And what I say to students is that what you have to do is this: about, not about, about. Okay, so one more reason for which spoken performance isn't receiving as much attention in class as it should is teachers' confidence. Often, native teachers are not very confident with their knowledge of the phonemic system, and that therefore they may avoid going anywhere near it. I would say that teachers don't have to be experts, and they don't have to be able to transcribe every single word. If we can explain the schwa sound to our students, and if we can direct them to the BBC lessons for other sounds, that's a good start. And while native teachers may not feel confident about their knowledge of the phonetics and phonology, the non-native teachers may not feel confident about their own pronunciation, their own accent, and therefore they may avoid teaching it. And what I could say to this is that everything that I have said today applies to learners of English as much as to teachers of English. Teachers should also constantly work on their pronunciation and their spoken performance and never become complacent. And on this challenging note, I will have to finish. Unfortunately, there is no time left for questions, but I will be around for the rest of the conference, so please come and talk to me. If you would like to email me, you can find my address through my blog. Thank you very much.